And here we are, episode 10 of Beezy's Stream of Consciousness podcast. I'm your humble host, Beezy. Today is Thursday, May 30th, 2024, coming to you from the Starbase One studio. And as much as I would like to get into other things today we've got a lot to cover as far as our story time. I've got a couple of chapters I want to read from Cloaks and Barbs, so we're going to get into that straight away. Within 2 seconds, I'll make a couple of minor adjustments here, and we'll get into that momentarily. And for those of you just now tuning in to our podcast, we've made a little format adjustment. I am going to be reading from one of my books. This one's Cloaks and Barbs. Yesterday we read basically just the beginning, the acknowledgments and the foreword. Today we're going to read the introduction and chapter 1, If We Are Spared. So let's get right into it, guys and gals, and I appreciate you listening. And here we go. This is the introduction to Cloaks and Barbs. Kelstein House, the Eagle's Nest, Berchtesgaden, Bavaria, July 2nd, 1943. The Chancellor of Greater Germany paced impatiently along the balcony of the chalet overlooking the Kelstein mountain valley. It was near supper time, and the Fuhrer was looking forward to one of his favorite dishes, angel hair pasta covered by vegetable marinara sauce. In order to blunt his hunger, so that he would not overindulge at the meal, he munched on an apple that had come from his personal orchards further down the mountain. "I tell you, Bormann," he said crossly to the uniformed man standing silent a few feet away, "I do not like having to wait around for this person. I particularly dislike your suggestion that I meet him here at Kelstein House instead of at my residence. This place is far too decadent for my tastes. I never should have listened to you and Speer when you wanted to build this monstrosity for me." Bormann did not move, but only said softly, "It very well may be that, my Fuhrer. However, it is precisely for that reason that I have had him brought here. I felt it important that you impress him with the trappings of your office." Hitler turned and glared at his private secretary even as he stuffed the remains of the apple into his mouth. His postage stamp of a mustache quivered as he rapidly chewed. "And what exactly is it that makes our meeting here so important?" he spat. Bormann remained calm and ventured an ironic smile. "Perhaps, my Fuhrer, he can offer us something that can ensure our victory against the Allies." Hitler grunted and turned back to lean against the railing. "As if we need his help," he muttered. "The Yanks, the Tommies, the Russians, they can all go to the devil. We will crush them all within a year, and with no one to thank other than our own people and our own ingenuity." His breathing was quick and rapid, and Bormann watched Hitler's shoulders bobbing with each breath. The secretary waited for his leader to launch into one of his signature diatribes, but none was forthcoming. Instead, he appeared to calm a bit, and after a few moments he inhaled deeply and spread his arms towards the mountains. "Do you smell that, my old friend?" he asked as he threw his head back. "It is the smell of the Alps. It is clean, it is pure, and it is German." He breathed deeply again and sighed explosively, sagging against the rail as if the experience had somehow drained him. "Indeed it is, my Fuhrer," agreed Bormann, rolling his eyes at his leader's theatrics. As he waited for the Chancellor to speak again, his mind wandered to the strange visitor they were about to receive. A week earlier, Bormann had received a very strange telephone call in his office in Berlin. It had come over his secure line, the one only known to members of the High Command, the one that was accessible only by certain telephones and certain exchanges in certain buildings in Berlin. "Yes," he had said tersely into the receiver, thinking it was Grand Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, Supreme Commander of the German Armed Forces. "Bormann," said a strange, sinister voice, "I must meet with you and your Chancellor." Bormann frowned and stared at his telephone. "Who is this?" "My name is unimportant at this time," said the voice. "What is important to us is that Germany prevail in this conflict." "Just a moment," he interrupted sharply. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" "You are wasting time," the voice said icily. I wish to meet with you at a place of your choosing 1 week from today. The Chancellor must be present as well. At that time, I will give you information that will be useful in destroying the Allies." Bormann thought quickly. If this person wanted to meet with Hitler so urgently, surely it was an attempt on the Fuhrer's life. "Impossible," he said evenly. "The Fuhrer is a very busy man and cannot be troubled." "Do not be a fool, Bormann," the voice said coldly. "If we wanted to take your Fuhrer's life, we could have done so long ago. If we wanted to take your life, we could do it right now. At this moment, I can see you are seated at your desk with the telephone in your left hand. Your right is spinning your ink pen in idle circles on your blotter. Your mouth is hanging open and you have a small stain on your uniform tunic just below the eagle insignia. Apple filling, I believe, from your strudel dessert at lunch." Bormann looked wildly around his office. "You cannot see me," the voice continued with barely perceptible amusement. "No, I am much too far away, even for your precious V rockets to reach." Bormann's hand went white as he gripped the receiver. How did he know that? "Well, what is it that you want, then?" he asked quietly. "As I said, I simply want to meet with you and your Fuhrer to discuss how we can help one another. You need not fear, not yet at least, for I will come alone and unarmed. I will come to talk and listen. My people will wait to hear what your Fuhrer has to say." Bormann cleared his throat, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "Why should you want to help us at all?" he asked in a small voice as he tried unsuccessfully to sound disinterested. "And what country do you represent?" "I will answer the second question first," Ed replied. "I do not represent a country as you understand such things. I represent my people, and we wish to see Germany be the victor in this war. Without us, you will lose, and lose badly, so badly that the Third Reich will join the Ottoman Turks, the French Bourbons, and the Romans in the ash heap of human history." Bormann had not achieved his station by being stupid or small-minded. However, something in this stranger's tone told him he must make this meeting happen. However, he had one last card to play, one last test to perform before he acquiesced. "You mentioned our V series of rockets," he said, stalling while his mind raced to figure out who this caller was and how he knew so much. "What do you know of them?" Bormann," said the stranger, as if he were addressing a child. "We know everything about your rockets. In fact, we know everything about the Third Reich. We know that the Allies will bomb your facilities at Peenemünde next month, and that you will move them from the middle work near Nordhausen. We know that the A4 rocket will be operationally ready by the end of the summer. Von Braun has already informed you of that, I believe." Bormann's mouth gaped open again. Von Braun had personally called him 2 days before with that very news. "Close your mouth, Bormann," the voice chided. "What else would you like to know?" The secretary had heard enough. "We will meet at Kelstein House 1 week from today. It is—" "We know exactly where it is," said the voice. "1 week hence, Bormann." And the line went dead. "I believe I require another apple," said Hitler with his head resting against the rail. "If this person of yours keeps me waiting much longer, Bormann, I might faint from hunger, in which case you—" At that moment an SS sergeant stepped onto the balcony, clicked his heels together smartly, and gave the Nazi salute. "Heil Hitler," he barked. "What is it, Feldwebel?" Bormann asked sharply. "The visitor is here, Herr Party Councillor." "With your permission, my Fuhrer?" Bormann asked. Hitler only grunted and slowly straightened himself. Bormann nodded to the young sergeant. "Bring him here," he said, "and leave us." The soldier saluted, turned on his heel, and went back into the residence. Presently, a very tall figure in a flowing black robe strode out onto the balcony. He wore a hood that was drawn low over his face and black leather gauntlets on his large hands. In the crook of one elbow, he carried what appeared to Bormann and Hitler to be a scroll of some kind. He towered over both of the Germans, and Hitler's eyes went wide as he looked up at him. "Welcome to Kelstein House, began Hitler somewhat nervously. "Call me Bote," he said slowly and menacingly. "That's a strange name," Hitler observed, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Harbinger, eh? Why should we call you that?" "Because I bring tidings," Bote said coldly, "and I can see the future." Hitler looked at Bormann and laughed. "One of your little jokes, eh, Martin?" he asked. A few locks of his hair came loose from his forehead and hung down in his eyes, giving him a wild look. "Nein, my Fuhrer," said Bormann quietly, "this is not a joke." "We'll see about that," scoffed Hitler. "Here, you." Exactly where are you from? England? Your German is horrible. The accent is all wrong. Another Allied spy, perhaps. A wild light had come into the Fuhrer's eyes, and the volume and pitch of his voice increased. Can you not speak now, Air Messenger? I am not from here, Bote replied. You would do well to let me speak, Chancellor, for your war does not go well. What? Thundered Hitler. The strange visitor was unmoved. Last month, your finest general allowed his forces to surrender in Africa, he said softly and slowly. Your greatest admiral withdrew your U-boats from the Atlantic. In 2 days, the Allies will land troops in Sicily. We will crush them, roared Hitler. You will not, countered the stranger. You will lose Italy. Meanwhile, England will continue to be resupplied by America now that your submarines no longer patrol the shipping lanes. That fool Donitz, bellowed Hitler. I told him not to. There is more, if you will hear it, said Bote ominously. In 3 weeks, England and America will bomb Hamburg and kill nearly 80,000 of your people. Silence, screamed Hitler shrilly. You will be silent. I will hear no more of this. He was trembling with rage. Bormann, shoot this thing and have the body burned. Bormann hesitated. Bormann! Draw your weapon now. Slowly, Bormann drew the Luger from its holster, but kept the weapon pointed at the wooden deck of the balcony. Do you not want to know why I am here? Asked Bote. I am both messenger and prophet. Hitler stood still, his face a frozen mask of rage, but he said nothing for several seconds. My people wish an alliance with yours, Chancellor, the stranger continued. You seek to destroy the Allies. We can help you do this. We have the means to bring England to her knees and the means to force America from English soil. Well, we too have the means, Hitler spat. A year from now, said Bote, ignoring the Chancellor, the Allies will have established a beachhead in France. Hitler was shaking with anger now. They will not, he hissed. My Atlantic wall is impenetrable. With respect, Chancellor, I think not. How do you suppose to know all of this, Herr Bote? Asked Bormann suspiciously. What do you have to convince us that you know these things and that you can indeed help us? Bote slowly raised one gloved hand and brandished the scroll. This will explain much, he said. The elders of my people have prepared it for you to review and see for yourselves that we have both the means to defeat England and the sight to see the future. This is ridiculous, Hitler said. Where are you from, really? Who are you, really? The scroll will explain all, said the menacing stranger. Time, however, is short, and you do well not to waste any more of it. The tide has turned against the Reich this summer, just as it has against your ally in the Pacific. If you do not act now, in less than 2 years, you will both be dead, and your enemies will carve up the fatherland like a fattened calf. He paused to let that sink in. Germany will be divided into zones, one controlled by America and England, the other controlled by the Soviets. Both of your names will be cursed, and... Enough, screamed Hitler. That is enough. Kill him now. Bormann again hesitated, and in that moment a shot rang out, spraying red blood and spongy tissue onto Hitler's face and tunic. The cloaked and hooded figure fell to his knees, and then slowly fell forward onto the deck. The scroll in his right hand rolled along the deck and came to rest at Hitler's feet. Behind the body of Bote stood the SS sergeant, his combat rifle still smoking. Are you hurt, mein Führer? He asked breathlessly. Nein, said Hitler, trembling. Danke, Feldwebel. He withdrew a handkerchief from his trouser pocket and mopped his bloody face as best he could with his shaking hands. Bormann, he asked as he tried to recover, why did you not fire? I wanted to hear him out, my Führer, replied the secretary, his voice quavering. I gave you an order, said Hitler, his voice dripping with disgust, as he regained his composure. Yes, my Führer. And you froze. Hitler appeared to have recovered sufficiently to begin a new diatribe, but he noticed the tightly wound scroll at his feet. What is this now? He asked quietly as he picked it up. He unrolled it and began to read as Bormann called for soldiers to come remove the body of Bote. In moments, 2 more SS soldiers appeared and moved to carry the dead body out, but Hitler, still reading, held up his hand. Wait. He continued reading for a few more moments, then stopped. His hands began trembling anew, and he dropped to his sides. Leave the body, he said numbly, and leave us undisturbed for a while. After the soldiers left, Bormann came to his Führer's side. What is it? He asked, shaken by the ashen expression on Hitler's face. The Fuhrer thrust the scroll into the secretary's hands. "Read," he said tersely, and walked shakily over to the body. Borman's eyes hurriedly scanned the scroll. At length he looked up and swallowed hard. "I had no idea," he stammered. "I merely thought that he was." "He was an emissary, you fool, just as he said," snarled Hitler as he stooped over the body, still face down on the deck amid a pool of thick red blood. "An ambassador to offer us the ultimate weapon against England and America," he continued sadly, "and we killed him." Curious to see the face of his deceased guest, Hitler gently rolled the body over onto its back and pulled back the hood. He screamed and leapt back nearly into Bormann's arms. Bormann looked and gasped, dropping his Luger onto the deck. "What the devil is that, my Fuhrer?" he asked as he felt bile rising in his throat. Hitler could only tightly shut his eyes and shake his head. "What do you think they will do to us? Will they destroy us instead, do you think?" "We must return to Berlin at once, Martin," whispered Hitler hoarsely, opening his eyes and staring at the abomination still bleeding on his balcony. "Call in the entire staff." "Everyone, my Fuhrer?" Bormann's face was deathly white, but he had stopped trembling. "Everyone, Martin. It is apparent to me that we are no longer battling mere men in this conflict. This is the greatest threat we could ever face." He stopped and straightened himself up, smoothing his hair and regaining his composure. Bormann could see that familiar gleam returning to his leader's eyes. He knew that his Fuhrer was a man capable of expressing both ends of the emotional spectrum within moments of one another. "Or," he said, strength rising in his voice, "it could be our greatest opportunity. Perhaps these people can indeed assist us, after all. Perhaps we can use them as we used Il Duce. I must hear what the others have to say first. Make the arrangements at once, Martin. We leave tonight." He started to walk past the body and stopped without looking down. "Keep this preserved. We will bring it with us. Send for Mengele at Auschwitz. I wish for him to examine it and tell us all what he thinks. I wish to know everything there is to know about our guest." "Jawohl, mein Fuhrer," Bormann replied as Hitler passed within the residence. He too straightened up and attempted to holster his weapon, but his shaking hand missed the holster several times. He could not take his eyes from the dead form before him. Soon soldiers reappeared to move the body, but they blanched when they saw it. "Put it in a bag," he said shakily, "and put it in my car." When they hesitated, he rounded on them. "Those are the Fuhrer's orders, you fools," he said as he mustered his courage. "Now move." They manhandled the body back into the residence, leaving him alone on the deck. He looked down at the bloodstains, turned abruptly, staggered over to the railing, and then vomited down the side of Kelstein Mountain. Chapter 1. USS Bogue, CVE-9, the Celtic Sea, 110 miles southeast of the Irish coast, August 5th, 1943. Ensign Thomas Gunn looked to his left and saw the yellow-shirted deck crewman raise the flag in his right hand and twirl it over his head repeatedly as he squinted into the rain. Gunn pushed the throttle against the stops, and the powerful Wright R-2600 engine of his plane roared and strained such that it had put all of his weight on the brakes until he received the signal to launch. Outside of the plexiglass canopy of his Avenger, rain assaulted the flight deck of the USS Bogue, making the 9,800-ton aircraft carrier pitch and corkscrew in the roiled seas. The deck officer continued to twirl his flag as he watched the bow of the carrier dive into wave troughs and rise at their crests. Gunn knew he would have to time it just right at the crest of a wave to successfully launch in this weather. If they timed it wrong, he would fly straight off the deck and into a wave, possibly killing himself and his two crewmen. At last, the deck officer dropped his flag, and Gunn released the brakes. The Avenger, a fat cylindrical torpedo bomber built by Grumman, lumbered down the short flight deck. Lightning flashed overhead, providing a brilliant counterpoint to the darkness of the North Atlantic storm. Normally, Gunn knew there would be no way that they would launch planes in such weather, but Bogue and her wing of 24 Avengers and 10 Wildcat fighters were all that stood between German U-boats and the convoy of merchant ships that bobbed along 8 miles to the south. He knew that there were some Allied submarines in the area, too, but he thought that they would be closer to the French coast, too far away to help protect the thin-hulled merchant ships. A few old destroyers were running interference to the east, but their sonar was very limited. Convoy Charlie Zebra 23 was a big one. 55 Liberty ships loaded with ammunition, jeeps, M4 Shermans, rations, gasoline, and troops, and it needed to get through. A week earlier, it had sailed from New York, Boston, and Norfolk, joining the escort carriers Bogue and Block Island, as well as their attendant destroyer escorts off the southern coast of Newfoundland on its way to Southampton. In the first few days of the convoy, they had seen fair weather and no U-boats. Gunn knew from the pre-sailing briefings that Allied subs would be sweeping the area to the east and south of the convoy, but like most of his fellow pilots, he quietly hoped that one or two would get through so that he could have a crack at them. He had only joined the fleet 2 months earlier, and this voyage represented his first convoy escort duty. The sandy-haired aviator was anxious for some action. He felt the flight deck pitch up, and soon his Avenger was clawing its way into the rain-filled dusk. He raised his landing gear and throttled his engine back a bit while making the mixture slightly leaner. He allowed himself to relax ever so slightly as he finally reached the assigned patrol altitude just below the angry dark clouds that spewed rain and lightning. "Sparks, radio the boat that we're on station," he called to radio man second class Anthony Giovanni in his station at the back of the bomber. "Yes, sir," came the reply. "Okay, fellas," he said to both Giovanni and gunner's mate third class William Ross, who was manning the gun turret several feet behind him. "Look sharp and let's see if we can find any krauts this time. In this weather, they're going to have to run deep or they might broach, so they'll only stick their scopes up for a few seconds at a time." "Got it, Skipper," said Ross. "Aye, aye," said Giovanni. Gunn banked the Avenger into a slow circle, and all three men trained their eyes onto the angry sea below, looking vigilantly for anything that might resemble a periscope. USS Barb, SS-220, 15 miles southeast of convoy Charlie Zebra 23. "Con, sonar, I've got the convoy," said radioman second class Peter Norris. He pressed his headphones against his ears and stared at the compass on its display. "Bearing 315 true, distance 15, speed 12. "Very well," called Lieutenant Robert Dunaway, executive officer of USS Barb, a Gato-class fleet submarine tasked, along with 4 of her older S-class sisters, with sanitizing the seas to the east and south of the approaching convoy. He consulted the charts in the control room of the submarine as it crept along at 3 knots, 100 feet below the surface of the Atlantic. "What's the weather like up there, Pete?" "Lots of wave action, sir. Sounds like one hell of a storm." "Yeah," grunted Dunaway. He walked 3 paces past the diving manifold and plainsman until he stood beneath the hatch to the conning tower. 2 khaki-clad legs dangled down through the hatch into the control room, and a craggy, careworn face looked down at him. "Sparks says he's got a convoy, Skipper, right where it should be. I've got the plot updating down here right now." Commander Wendell Matthews nodded and leaned his head against the periscope. "Very well, Mr. Dunaway," he said with a sigh. He was tired, hungry, and perplexed. He knew that the escort carriers had refined their anti-submarine warfare tactics during the last part of the prior year and the first part of the current one, and that they had bagged quite a few U-boats in the last 90 days. But he could not imagine why they had gone nearly a week without so much as a single contact. He stroked his week-old beard thoughtfully. "You think our helpers are staying out of trouble?" he asked at last. Dunaway looked back up. "Well, they'll be submerged just like we are. That wave action up there would play hell with an S-boat, sir." Matthews smiled. "Yeah, riding in an S in the middle of the North Atlantic is a bear, even in calm seas." He hopped down through the open hatch into the control room. "Depth under the keel?" he asked. "We're into the basin, sir. Depth is off the dial. We're in nice deep water." "Very well." He looked at his watch and looked forward. "Convoy should zigzag to the right in about another 20 minutes. I'm going to go grab some soup and coffee. Come get me at 1800. "Aye, aye, sir." As Matthews went forward to the officers' war room to eat and relax, Dunaway climbed into the conning tower and sat on the hatch combing, just as Matthews had, with his legs dangling into the control room and his arms draped over the search periscope handles. "Sir?" Dunaway turned to see Seaman First Class Thaddeus Schwartz looking at him. The boy was wearing his telephone talker gear. "What is it, Schwartz?" "Where are the krauts, sir? It's been too quiet this trip." "You ready for some action, son?" The lad smiled and nodded. I guess so, sir. He froze and put his hands to his headset, listening intently. Sir, sonar contact bearing 175 relative. Submerged contact, twin screws. Speed 7. Heading 315. Right towards the convoy, said Dunaway as he dropped out of the conning tower into the control room. Get the captain up here, he called forward. Looking back into the conning tower, he said, Chief O'Brien, start your track and fire up the TDC. He saw the head of Seaman Schwartz appear at the lip of the hatch and peered down at him. Looks like you're going to finally get some action, kid. Schwartz grinned and disappeared back into the conning tower. U-462. Captain Lieutenant Bruno Muller leaned against his periscope and slowly peeled an orange as his command U-462 crept towards the Allied convoy at 7 knots. His was one of the last U-boats to remain in the Allied shipping lanes after Grand Admiral Donitz had ordered his submarine fleet back to continental European waters during the previous month. The Allies' anti-submarine measures had resulted in unacceptable U-boat losses, and Donitz didn't want to risk having his fleet decimated. He did, however, order a handful of veteran boats to take their time returning to the European coast in the hopes that they would be able to pick off a few more merchantmen. U-462 was one such boat, and her skipper was known to be a careful yet resourceful sub-commander. Capitan, hissed a sonarman from the sonar shack a few feet away. The lad slowly turned the wheel on his panel, that in turn moved the sub's sonar head. Aspect changing on the convoy. It is turning to new course of 135, sir. Muller smiled and bit into his orange. It was still sweet and juicy. Some of the juice dribbled down his chin and into his beard. Helm, he said quietly. Hold your course. Hans, he said to his executive officer standing at the chart table with the quartermaster. Update your attack. They're coming right to us now. Stand by on tubes 1 through 4. Yair, Capitan, replied the burly exec, who relayed the orders via voice tube to the forward torpedo room. Sonar, what is the closest vessel? Asked Muller as he took another bite of orange. The young sonarman listened for a few moments and then said softly, The lead ship is a twin-screw vessel, sir, making turns for 10 knots. There is much surface noise, wave action. Sounds like one of the older American destroyers, sir. Muller nodded. Ah, he said, finishing his orange. He tossed the rind aside. We will kill this one first, I think. When the convoy scatters, we will kill as many merchantmen as we can before we retire. What about air cover from their little carriers? Asked Hans, looking worried. Or perhaps English bombers based in Ireland. The storm overhead will likely ground their aircraft, my old friend, said Muller. However, we will look first. Helm 10 degrees up on the planes. Dobler, make your depth 15 meters. Gently, please. Up periscope. There was some distant creaking as the U-boat changed depth, and the periscope slid out of its well with an oiled hiss. 15 meters, Capitan, said Chief Dobler from his place at the vent manifold. Muller already had his eye out to the periscope and was turning it slowly in a circle. U-462 gently began rolling from side to side from the wave action 45 feet above their heads. Maintain this depth, he said quietly. Ah, it is as I thought. Seas are about 3 to 4 meters, very unpleasant for sailors on the destroyers and merchantmen. It is getting quite dark and the rain is coming down in sheets. The Allies cannot have any of their sub-hunters up in that. No, my friends, we have only to deal with the escorts, I think. Demon 1-9er. Gunn was fighting his aircraft's controls. The storm was getting worse and the swirling winds were whipping the rain in such a way that it was nearly impossible to see the surface of the ocean. You fellas see anything? He asked his crew. Negative, sir, said Ross bluntly. Can't see shit in this. Yeah, it's pretty bad, agreed Giovanni. He continued to search the waters below when something caught his eye. He blinked twice and caught his breath. Hold it. I think I got something. Where? Asked Gunn excitedly. About 5 o'clock, sir, about 50 yards away. Looks like a periscope. Gunn banked the Avenger and squinted into the gloom. The ambient light had nearly faded completely, but intermittent lightning flashes briefly illuminated the sky and sea. Wait for the next flash, sir, said Giovanni. There. Sure enough, Gunn could make out the linear wisp of foam as the broomstick-like periscope cut its way through the waves. I'll be damned, he murmured. Sparks, radio the contact in now. It looks like our friends are headed right for this guy. Giovanni hurriedly got off a contact report on his wireless while Gunn tipped his wings towards the periscope. USS Barb. He's changed depth, sir, reported Norris. I'm starting to lose him in the surface clutter. He'll be at periscope depth, muttered Matthews as he tried to down the rest of his beef barley soup. He turned to Dunaway. Let's go. They climbed up into the cramped conning tower where Dunaway took his position at the torpedo data computer, the TDC, while Matthews sat before the periscope. Make your depth 60 feet. Bring us up nice and quiet. Mr. Dunaway, update your solution and make ready tubes 1 and 2. The orders were repeated and implemented, and soon Barb was 60 feet below the churning surface. Matthews peered through his search periscope. Heavy wave action, he reported for the benefit of his crew. He could feel the waves as they slapped against the periscope mask. It's damn near dark, but there are lots of lightning. I may be able to see... His voice trailed off as there was a tremendous flash of electricity in the distance. In that moment, he thought he could see what looked like a long broomstick cutting through the waves dead ahead. Beyond that, he could see the unmistakable silhouette of a Mayhem-class destroyer bearing down on them. Overhead, he could see the twinkling running lights of some sort of aircraft. Downscope, he said hurriedly. Helm, full right rudder. Make your course 080. Make your depth 100 feet. In front of him, the helmsman put his wheel all the way over to starboard, while the plainsman and diving officer worked to move Barb further into the black water. Behind him, Dunaway and his fire control team feverishly worked to update their firing solution. Let's get out to seaward a bit and let the hunter-killers do their work. He shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe the Navy's got anything aloft in this mess. Solution updated, Skipper, said Dunaway after a few moments. Good. Ready stern tubes 1 and 2, just in case the can misses. Demon 19er. Gunn toggled the switch that opened the Avenger's bomb bay doors where the 2 general-purpose 500-pound bombs hung, ready to drop on any contacts. He quickly armed both bombs and brought the fat Grumman around. The vicious wind outside buffeted the tubby bomber, and Gunn fought to line up his sights on the periscope in the water below. Okay, I'm lined up, he said excitedly. He's right there. He turned the Avenger in a gentle bank towards the periscope and the U-boat beneath. Here we go, he said quietly as he threw the switch on his instrument panel that would release the bombs. He waited for the slight jolt and the accompanying lightning of the plane that would mean that the bombs were away, but nothing happened. He hit the switch again and again. Nothing happened. Swearing loudly, he had to pull up and circle back for another run. What gives? Asked Giovanni. The damn bomb release is kaput, he raged. Coming back around, Tony. See if you can release them manually. In this weather, we're only getting a couple of more passes. Hustle, kid. Aye, Skipper, said the radio operator as he unbuckled his safety harness and wormed his way to the bomb bay electrical panel at the front of his position. U-462. Active sonar, reported the sonarman. The American destroyer is pinging, sir. He is headed straight for us, said Muller, still watching through the periscope. Range, 10,500 meters, angle on the bow, 10. Set it up, Hans. Solution set, Capitan, reported Hans, sweat dripping from his nose and onto his paper chart. Tubes 1 through 4 ready, outer doors open. Fire 1, said Muller. Fire 1, repeated Hans as he depressed the plunger that launched the weapons. The boat shuddered as compressed air ejected the G-7A torpedo from its tube. Torpedo away. Fire 2, ordered Muller, and repeated the order to empty tubes 3 and 4. All torpedoes away, reported the sonarman, straight on course. Running time, Hans? Asked Muller. Hans consulted his chart and checked his handheld stopwatch. 55 seconds, Herr Capitan. Very well. Dobler, make your depth 70 meters. Quiet the boat. Demon 19er. It's no good, Mr. Gunn, said Giovanni miserably as he fiddled with the manual bomb release. There's corrosion all over the place down here. Looks like all the electrics are foobarred down here. What about the manual release? Asked Gunn, shaking his head in disbelief. Giovanni grabbed the manual release handle and noticed a cake of brown rust where it fit into the bulkhead panel. He tried to move it, but it wouldn't budge. Talk to me, Tony, intoned Gunn, emotion rising in his voice. Giovanni put all his weight against the handle, but it wouldn't move. It's no good, sir, he said, puffing from the exertion. It's rusted solid with the bulkhead. Damn it, Gunn swore as he pulled up and banked away from the U-boat. We got to get those bombs free. Uh-oh, Ross said as the Avenger turned. Sir, it looks like the crowd just fired some fish. I count 1, 2, 3, 4 wakes. Swell, said Gunn. USS Barb. Con sonar, torpedoes in the water, called Norris. I count 4 fish in the water, headed for the tin can. Can we fire, Skipper? Asked Dunaway. Muller shook his head. No, damn it, he said helplessly, not with the crowd between us and the convoy. I'd hate to hit the can or one of those Murchies, and we can't go up there and get all involved in the fight. The guys on the can won't know who's who down here. I'd hate even worse to get depth charged, torpedoed by our own people. No, let's hold our course, stay quiet and see what happens. He swore softly and angrily slapped the side of the conning tower. U-462. Hans's eyes were fixed on his stopwatch. 10 seconds to impact, Capitan, he reported. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 2 distant, muffled explosions rumbled through the boat, and the German sailors exchanged tired smiles. What do you hear? Muller asked his sonarman. The boy kept his earphones pressed tightly to his head, and his eyes screwed shut. I hear breakup noises, Capitan, he said, opening his eyes and grinning. Muller nodded. Dobler, bring us to 15 meters. Hans, reload all tubes. Upscope. Demon 19er. Oh, crap. Gunn and his crew orbited helplessly as 2 of the German torpedoes impacted the keel of USS Cushing. They penetrated the hull just below the engine room and exploded the fuel oil, which broke the back of the destroyer. They watched in horror and anger as the ship broke into 2 pieces, each sinking in less than 5 minutes. Tony, get on the horn and get another can over there, said Gunn through clenched teeth. He had never felt so angry and helpless in his life. Aye, sir. They continued to circle, trying to pierce the rain with their eyes for survivors. There was so much burning oil and flotsam on the surface that it was difficult to make out anything. After a few moments, Giovanni came back on the intercom. Sir Bogue is ordering us back aboard. What about another destroyer? Preble is en route, sir. ETA is 15 minutes, give or take. Can I acknowledge the recall order? Damn it, there's a crowd U-boat still out there. We've got 2 bombs to drop. I understand, sir, said Giovanni miserably. What are your orders? Other than the burning oil on the surface and the occasional lightning flash, there was complete darkness below them. Gunn checked his fuel and swore so loudly that both Ross and Giovanni jumped. Okay, Tony, he said finally. Acknowledge the order. Tell them we're coming home and tell them about the bombs, too. With that, he gave one last look at the dark water below and banked his Avenger around to the north, following his direction finder back to Bogue. USS Barb. It looks bad, reported Matthews. The can is gone, broken in 2. Must have hit the keel just below the boilers, said Dunaway somberly. Yeah, Matthews agreed. I see burning oil on the surface, some wreckage too. I'm sure there are some survivors. The Radio Shack reports a message from the screen commander to Preble, reported Schwartz as he listened to his headset. Preble is to pick up survivors. Hold it, hissed Matthews. I think I see that crowd bastard. The crew in the conning tower waited breathless. Yeah, it's got to be him. He's headed inside the convoy. Guy's got balls, admitted Dunaway. Yeah, well, we're about to cut him off. He's far enough away from our people that I think we can risk a couple of stern shots. Okay, Robert, plot this. Range 7,500, angle on the stern 300, depth 50. 20-foot vertical spread between the fish. Set it up. Dunaway and his attack team fed the data into the TDC, while they also made the proper notations on their charts. After a few moments, Dunaway looked up. Solution set, sir. Ready stern tubes 1 and 2, Matthews grimly ordered. Ready. Dunaway couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. Open outer doors open. Matthews withdrew a stopwatch from his trouser pocket. I have the run time at 39 seconds on both fish. He looked at Dunaway for confirmation and got it. Nod. Match bearings and fire. Barbs shook as their stern tubes loosed 2 Mark 14 torpedoes. U-462. Torpedoes in the water, astern, screamed the sonarman. All ahead flank, ordered Muller immediately. Where did they come from? He turned to his plainsman. Full down on the planes. Dobler, Make our depth 150 meters, quickly. The U-boat's hull creaked and groaned in protest as she drove deeper into the black water. USS Barb. He's going deep, reported Schwartz as he listened to the sonarman. The high fish will probably miss, opined Dunaway. Matthews nodded. Let's hope he gets stupid and tries to turn, he said venomously. Dunaway consulted his stopwatch. 12 seconds. U-462. Seal all watertight doors, bellowed Muller. Brace for impact. Sound collision alarm. As watertight hatches slammed throughout the boat and klaxons sounded, everyone aboard heard the high-pitched screech of the American torpedoes. The high-running one passed harmlessly 40 meters above the conning tower, but the lower one ran straight and true and hit the U-boat right between her twin rudders, jamming itself against the starboard screw. Its forward momentum drove the warhead against the propeller shaft, and the body of the weapon wedged itself between the propeller shaft and the hull, stopping the screw. But it did not explode. USS Barb. Matthews looked at Dunaway and back at his stopwatch. They missed, Dunaway said simply. They both couldn't have missed, thundered Matthews. He keyed the 1MC intercom. Con, sonar, what about the fish? Sir, the top fish was a clean miss, reported Norris. I can still hear it running in the distance. The second fish hit something, but it didn't detonate. Damn faulty exploders, raged Matthews. Those Buord bastards said they had them all fixed. Damn, damn, damn. Sir, I'm getting weird noises from the crowd boat, Norris put on over the still open circuit. Matthews looked up. Say again? There's something going on with the U-boat, sir, he repeated. Helm, bring us about, the captain said. Put us on the U-boat's tail. Mr. Dunaway, update his solution on the forward tubes. We're going to finish this Jerry off if we have to fire every damn fish we have. U-462. Motor room, what's happening back there? Muller yelled into the voice tube. He looked at his exec. What the devil's going on, Hans? The torpedo did not explode. No, but it must have hit us in the screws and rudder, said the sweating exec. Starboard motor has seized. Something is stopping us from turning. We've lost rudder control also, mein Kapitän. Why? Muller was purple-faced with rage. I do not know, sir. Get back there and give me a report. As Hans went aft, Muller went forward to the sonar station. What are you hearing from the American behind us, he demanded. The sonarman listened and blanched. He is closing on our position, Captain. He has turned and is moving towards us, submerged at about 3 knots. He dashed aft and grabbed a voice tube. Engine room, port motor ahead full. He heard the hum as the port electric motor spun up to full power. Suddenly there was a loud pop and all the interior lights went out. There was a strong smell of burning insulation. Engine room, he yelled into the tube. What is happening? At that moment a figure appeared bearing a flashlight through the aft hatch. Captain, said Hans's voice. We have flooding in the motor room. The torpedo must have popped a shaft seal when it hit us, and we are taking on more water than the pups can handle. It has shorted the electrics as well, but I have our electricians working on it. At that, Muller began screaming, and the Americans are bearing down on us even as we speak. The one who did this to us is less than 7,000 meters away, and the convoy escorts will be on our heads in moments. Hans Jaeger was a good officer and a solid practical man. He knew his master's moods. They had served together since 1939, and knew that his captain wanted options. We could fire our stern tube at him, he said slowly. We kill him and we dive to test depth to make repairs. We make depth charges with our tanks. We can operate them by hand. We make depth changes with our tanks. We can operate them by hand. Muller reached out and grabbed his exec's shoulder. Make it so, he said. USS Barb. I don't know, sir, said Norris. He stopped his screws, and I can hear all sorts of mechanical transients over there. Matthews frowned. What do you think we did to him, he asked Dunaway. What difference does it make if he's dead in the water, his executive officer answered. Let's just creep up to him and shoot a couple of fish up his keister, sir. I'll bet he's waiting for us to get nice and close, and then he'll pump a couple of fish at us from his stern tube. That's what I would do. Dunaway shrugged. Well, then, let's not give him the chance, sir, he said reasonably. He tapped the TDC next to him. I've got him all dialed in, boss. Matthews grinned, showing all his teeth. Yeah, he said with a chuckle. Let's save ourselves a bunch of trouble and just send him to hell. Demon 1-9er. Baker Oboe, this is Demon 1-9er, called Gunn as he orbited Bogue in a slow, fuel-saving racetrack pattern. I'm nearly bingo fuel at this time. Shall I divert to Baker Love, over? That's a negative, Demon 1-9er, said the landing signal officer on Bogue. We've just about cleaned up the deck for you. You can enter the landing pattern on your next pass. One of Gunn's squadron mates had landed his Avenger awkwardly in the storm and had plowed into some parked Wildcat fighters on Bogue's narrow, crowded flight deck. That had forced Gunn to circle slowly around the carrier in the dark while the deck crews cleaned up the mess. He had just about used up his reserve fuel when he finally requested permission to divert to Block Island, Bogue's sister carrier steaming 7 miles away. "What's the word, Skipper?" asked Ross as he fidgeted uncomfortably in his turret. "They say they got the deck cleaned up for us," said Gunn. "Get ready to trap, gents. This one's going to be fun." Night carrier landings were considered very risky, but Bogue's skipper, her air group commander, squadron commander, and LSO all thought they could bring Gunn aboard with a reasonable margin of safety. Gunn was a good pilot, if a little green, and they didn't want him having to ditch in these seas. "Okay, Demon 19er," said the LSO over the radio. "We're going to do this one time. If I wave you off, you turn 10 degrees to port, sit her right down next to Johnston. She's our plane guard, and she'll be ready for you. Make damn sure those bombs are safe. You got it?" "Acknowledged," said Gunn tersely. "Okay, fellas, here we go." As Gunn turned the Avenger onto its final approach to the carrier, he spied something bright in the sky to his left. He tried to keep his eye on the LSO, who stood on the port side aft edge of Bogue's flight deck, but soon it became apparent that something extraordinary was happening. It appeared to be a huge ball of fire that fell out of the clouds to his left at a 15-degree angle. It was enormous. Gunn thought it was several yards across, and it trailed a tail of fire that stretched back into the clouds. Gunn was transfixed watching it as it roared over the convoy and across the bow of Bogue before plowing into the water a mile or so away, still near the still-burning wreckage of Cushing. Gunn watched it disappear into the water within an explosion of steam, felt a hard thump in his seat, and was thrown forward in his safety harness, and found that he had landed perfectly on Bogue, having somehow snagged an arrestor cable. "What the hell was that thing, sir?" asked Ross, as Gunn shakily shut off his engine and secured the aircraft for stowage on the deck. "I don't know, Billy," he said, "and I sure as hell don't want to know how I just landed this plane either." U-462. "Fire the stern tube," called Muller over the voice tube to the after torpedo room. It was a blind shot, and he knew it, but he had no choice. The American submarine would find and kill him if he did not take action, and if he surfaced in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the night, and in the middle of the convoy, they were dead men. In the aft torpedo room, Muller's torpedoman pulled the levers to open the compressed air flask, which in turn ejected the torpedo. USS Barb. "Match bearings and fire 3, Matthews said to Dunaway. They had crept within 5,000 yards of the disabled U-boat and had changed Barb's depth by 50 feet in order to protect them from a blind stern tube shot. Dunaway hit the plunger to eject the fish, and when he did, they all heard a very curious sound. There was a heavy crash in the water fairly close at hand, and throughout the boat men could hear sizzling and bubbling as if Barb were in the center of a pot of boiling water. A wave violently pushed against the starboard side of the boat and sent men and unsecured items flying. The bow swung around as if pushed by huge hands, and they temporarily lost depth control. U-462. It was worse for the Germans. The force of the water displacement loosened the jammed torpedo, which also jarred the torpedo propeller shaft. Water now sprayed into the motor room through the compromised seal as if it had come from a fire hose. The electricians who had been working on the motors, those that could get to their feet that had not been knocked unconscious by the high-pressure spray, fought their way to the watertight door and dogged it tight, closing off the compartment. They stumbled forward and made their way to the control room where they told Muller their situation. USS Barb. "I bet he's going to surface, if he can," said Dunaway. "Put us on the roof," shouted Matthews. He didn't know what was happening, but he figured he would take his chances on the surface rather than down in the dark water with a hostile submarine hovering off his bow. The diving officer blew the ballast tanks. The plainsman turned the planes, and slowly Barb rose to the surface. Matthews, however, had no illusions about the Germans. "Battle surface," he called, and the hull echoed with the sound of the general quarters gong. U-462. "We must surface, sir," implored Hans. "Our motor room is flooded. Our electrics are out." Yes, I know the situation, Hans," said Muller, tired and defeated. "We will surface and abandon ship to save the men. The Allied convoy can pick them up. You and I, however, will scuttle this boat and ensure that our intelligence materials, books, and machines do not fall into their filthy hands." Hans Jaeger swallowed hard and cleared his throat. He stood up straight and nodded. I will see to it, Herr Capitan. USS Barb. Barb broke the surface of the Atlantic at 19:30. Immediately, her gun crews emerged from the conning tower in their foul-weather gear and prepped the deck weapons for combat. One crew manned the 3-inch gun forward of the conning tower, while others scurried for the 50 caliber machine guns mounted on the cigarette deck and the afterdeck. Meanwhile, Matthews and a pair of lookouts manned the bridge, while a quartermaster uncovered a signal lamp and began signaling to the closest ships in the Allied convoy. A final crew, the boarding party led by Dunaway, readied the ship's rubber boat to board and seize the German vessel. Soon all weapons were trained on that piece of ocean where the U-boat would be surfacing. U-462. Listen to me, my men, said Muller as he manfully tried to maintain control of his emotions. Nearly the entire ship's complement had gathered either in the sub's control room or adjoining spaces to hear their captain's last orders as their boat slowly rose to the surface. They were a grim lot, for they knew not only that they would be taken prisoner, but that their captain and executive officer would die with the vessel. He spoke quickly, for he knew the time was short. Listen to me now. These are my final orders to you. We will surface in a few moments, and when we do, you are to assemble on the weather decks. The Americans will observe all Geneva Convention rules and will probably take you to one of their convoy merchant vessels. They will feed you, give you medical examinations, and clean clothes. You will conduct yourselves like sailors of the Kriegsmarine. Give them nothing but your name, rate, and service number, nothing more. They will take you to England, where you will be interred for some time, after which you will be returned to the fatherland in an exchange of prisoners. We are at periscope depth, said Hans softly. Only a few more moments. Muller nodded soberly. Very well. Men, go to the escape trunk, and when the order is given, assemble on the deck. Make no provocative action, or they will fire upon us. If you have something white to wave, use it. Do not resist them physically. Now it is time. It has been my privilege to serve with you aboard the Fuhrer's undersea boat 462. I regret that I have failed to bring glory to you and to the fatherland. That is my fault and my responsibility. Now I must pay the price for my failure. Dismissed. A few moments later, the bow of 462 broached the surface of the water. USS Barb. U-boat off the port bow, sang out one of the lookouts. All eyes turned to see as the German vessel slowly crept from beneath the water. The quartermaster on the bridge turned the ship's searchlight on the U-boat's bridge, and presently German sailors began to appear, most of them waving white flags. Hold your fire, Matthews shouted to the gun crew over the storm. Hold your fire. He had the light paid over the entire U-boat's deck, where he soon counted 47 wet and bedraggled German sailors, many of them waving the flag of surrender. Hold your position, Mr. Dunaway, called Matthews. Wait for the can. He put his binoculars to his eyes again and grunted. Okay, they're staying clear of their deck guns. Smart Krauts. Within another 5 uncomfortable, for all parties, minutes, a shape appeared out of the storm and powerful searchlights played over both submarines. There were 2 loud toots from the ship's horn, and a blinker light on the ship's signal bridge indicated the ship was lowering her whaleboat. The ship quickly came into view on the far side of the U-boat, and all could see that it was an American destroyer. Matthews saw that her whaleboat was in the water and motoring slowly over to the German submarine. Mr. Dunaway, he called down to the deck. Go, before they sink her. Dunaway and his crew started paddling for the U-boat, while the destroyermen began taking the Germans off in teams. He noticed that the submarine was sitting lower in the water than it should have been, and that the deck was nearly awash. Hurry, he shouted to his sailors. They're trying to scuttle her. A few moments later, they had the rubber boat lashed to the conning tower. A team from the destroyer, it was the Preble, joined his force, and together the 2 teams stormed the U-boat. They found the control room dark and slowly filling with water. The team from Preble went forward while Dunaway led his sailors aft. In the engine room, he found 2 forlorn figures sitting against the diesels and drinking brown liquid from a dirty bottle. He had them dragged to their feet and shined his light in the face of the shorter one. You speak English? He asked roughly. The man squinted into the light and scowled. Yeah, he said. I speak little English. He gestured to his larger companion. He does not. Where are the scuttling charges? Dunaway demanded. The man shook his head. No explosives, he said. Propeller seals broke. Ship will sink soon. You wish to stay here and die with Germans? He gave a short, guttural chuckle and repeated in German for his companion, who also laughed. No, I really don't, said Dunaway. How soon? The man shrugged and gestured to his legs. The water had risen almost to his knees. Not long now, he said. We did not want to blow up ship with my men on deck, so we let her sink from damage. Dunaway's expression softened, and he even ventured an ironic smile. You crazy kraut bastard, he said. You're damn near drunk. You can't be the captain, can you? Bruno Muller, he said, and put out his hand. Captain of the Führer's Untersee Boot 462. Or I used to be, he added, looking sadly at the rising water. This is Hans Jäger, executive officer. Yes, we are getting drunk. But we are prisoners now. There is nothing more here for you or for us. We destroy code books and code machine. You take us somewhere for hot shower and food. He winked at Dunaway. You crazy Yankee bastard. An hour or two later, with all of the German prisoners fed, showered, and bunked down for the night, and with as many of Cushing's survivors as could be saved, Preble left the convoy to deliver her cargo to England. The rest of the convoy took a slower route to Southampton, while Barb motored as fast as her diesels could move her towards the Allied subbase in Portsmouth, England. U-462 had long since succumbed to her wounds and now lay on the sandy bottom of the Atlantic alongside the wreckage of USS Cushing and a spherical object of great size whose surface bubbled as if from very high heat. It was some time before the bubbling ceased, and when it did, a very long, thin cable emerged from the top of the sphere. It extended up towards the surface, where the wave action whipped it about, but it did not stop until it actually touched the surface. And when it did, it began glowing a phosphorescent green and giving off an odd sound that could be heard for miles around. And there you go. That was the introduction and chapter 1 of Cloaks and Barbs. And my goodness, we are nearly an hour into our show. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. And tomorrow being Friday will be Top 10 Friday. So we'll do that and we'll read some more. Appreciate you spending time with us. On behalf of producer Elsa, our engineer Lily, and Ben, our screener and security, live long and prosper.